this is going to be a huge part of our lives moving forward. And to me, I was like, this is our .com era. One of the beautiful things about crypto, right, is that you can get in very early as opposed to like the stock market. I really do believe that we are at this inflection point where we're going to see a rotation finally from some of the memes coin stuff that's going on into like true utility. Talk about a comeback story, man. In the last market cycle, Helium faced a lot of criticism because, again, as we talked about, they had to build the infrastructure first and then the revenue came. Now we're seeing the revenue. Going head to head with Google Maps, putting a camera in your car, getting tokens for collecting street level imagery. This is going to make sense and resonate with a lot of people.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Unleashing DePIN Podcast. My name is Tyler. I'm your host, and like always, I am very excited for this next conversation. We're not actually chatting with a project today. We're chatting with a friend, a colleague in the space, someone that I have a lot of respect for. He's got great insights with respect to looking at DePIN projects. He's been in the space for a while. He's really hands-on with so many different projects. So I'm excited to have Bradley from DePIN Connection on the podcast. Brad, how you doing?
I'm great, Tyler. Excited to be on today, man. I love everything that you do for the space, and also love the fact that you recommended that medicine ball last week, man. The last couple of weeks, I've been a little under the weather and lost my voice, and Tyler said, you need to go to Starbucks and get this medicine ball. So that did wonders, man.
I'm so glad to hear it. I always thought it was gimmicky. I think I messaged you this too, but my wife swears by him, and she bought me one when I was sick. Couple weeks. I've still been in this cold. It's this perpetual cold cycle with 2024. I don't know what it is, but yeah, they do seem to work. So I'm glad you're feeling better.
For sure. I've been saving my voice up, man, because for a while it was a little dire, but I'm about 95% now, so good to go.
All right, good. We're glad to have you. So maybe just for an introduction, I'd love to learn about how you got into DePIN, maybe talk about what you were doing before. One of the things I love about you is that you really made DePIN your career between what you're doing on the deployment side, what you're doing with content and all that stuff. So I'd just love to hear a little bit about your backstory, how we got here, and we'll kick it off from there.
Yeah, sure, man. I am doing this full time now as of earlier this year, but before I got into crypto and the DePIN space in particular, I was a finance major. I was in sales for most of my career in the solar industry, actually. For a number of years, I sold directly to consumer and business to business. Started off in St. Louis, where I'm from, moved up to New York and sold up there for a while, and made the move, I guess it's been about 6 years ago now, to Washington, D.C. And I worked for a drone service company. So we were actually doing thermal inspections on utility scale solar. So we were flying drones over these large solar arrays with a thermal sensor to look for heat differentials, because if a panel had a defect, heat would build up where that defect was. So we were able to very efficiently and effectively determine where there were issues on these utility scale solar sites. So that was pretty cool. I was about 2 weeks into the job and I realized that our product had become obsolete, our flagship product I was supposed to sell. So I had to think outside the box a little bit. And we were using some technology called an orthomosaic. So basically you fly in a grid pattern, take thousands of pictures, and you can stitch them together to create a 3D model that gets very precise location data. And I started thinking, okay, what else could we do with this? And I'd sold commercial solar before. And when it comes to measuring rooftops, it can be very tedious. I set out to talk to our data team. I'm like, hey, do you think this could work? Could we use the same technology to fly over Walmarts and Targets to measure where their air conditioning units are and their drains are so that we can design solar systems more efficiently and effectively? Created this new product and very quickly realized we couldn't send our own pilots out. So I found a pilot network to tap into and started calling solar developers around the country and ran a drip campaign and started seeing if there's an appetite for this product. And in the end, I was able to connect the pilot network. I was able to get us in with 5 of the 10 top commercial solar developers, found a team on Upwork to take a 3D point cloud, put it into a CAD file. So we had a deliverable and was able to hit my quota. So it was pretty cool, man. And I think that was really critical experience for what I'm doing now, because a lot of what I'm doing in the DePIN space today with creating some businesses that I'll touch on in a moment, it really takes thinking outside the box, because we're still in a very new arena here and there's no playbook. So in a lot of cases, you're kind of creating your own playbook. But I was there for all of a year And my division was the one profitable division, but with it being a startup, I started to get a little concerned about how much runway there was. So started looking for jobs and got a job with the actual solar manufacturer of the equipment I used to sell up in New York, and that moved me to Chicago. And
Interesting.
yeah, so my job with that was really to find owners of solar companies that would buy and sell our product at a 30% premium and sell our product exclusively. But then my job was to work with them on marketing strategy, pricing strategy, train their sales reps, be a consultant, if you will. And ended up expanding my territory out to 10 states. I think towards then I was responsible for right around $125 million a year in revenue for the company. And I was running a lot of national sales trainings. We were in that period where inflation had been on the rise, and I realized, okay, interest rates are going to go up. And we hadn't seen this since 2008, really in my professional career, because after '08, we had seen really low interest rates. I went back and I was able to find some correlation with some of the financial products we were using to sell our equipment and realized, okay, this loan product we're selling does really well in low interest rate environments, but it's going to get crushed when rates go up. We had a third-party ownership lease product that had done very well when we had seen rates go up slightly. I started doing national trainings, preparing my colleagues to train their accounts for this shift that was coming up. And it was really critical to our business as a whole, because I think our loan product went from 70% of our sales down to roughly 15%. That lease product went from 8% up to 70%. So we saw a huge flip. I would say that job, between my sales trainings, between the consulting mindsets, and really doing the financial analysis, has also been really critical in what I'm doing today. And while I was working that job, I got COVID. It was, I think, beginning of 2020, or was it 2021? I was in quarantine, and I'd always wanted to understand Bitcoin and blockchain technology, and I'd had friends telling me about it over the years. And for me, like, I had to really understand something to really dive in and give it my full attention. And I decided to take a blockchain course on Udemy. I'm not sure how it's pronounced, but great app, by the way. And when I took this course, this light bulb went on for me, and I realized, okay, this is going to be a huge part of our lives moving forward. And to me, I was like, this is our .com era, right? Where I was too young to take advantage of that, but I could certainly get into the weeds here, and I think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity moving forward. So from that point forward, I took my nights, my weekends, just grinding, trying to understand the space, because there's a lot to wrap your head around in crypto. And that's where I came across a project called Helium. And this is, Helium has been an inspiration to a lot of people in DePIN today. A lot of the projects that have moved into the DePIN space, drew inspiration from Helium. And I remember it was like 3 o'clock in the morning. I was doing research one night, and I was like, man, I'm going to order one of these hotspots. And the next night, I'm doing more research, and I'm like, man, I'm going to order a few more. And the next day, I start calling some of my friends, and I'm like, hey, if I set one of these up with you, would you be interested? I'll pay for the install and everything and the equipment. I'll share the token rewards with you. And that's how my journey in DePIN started. And it grew from there. Once I had a few friends on board, I just ordered more hotspots, and then started a referral program, and people started calling me. They're like, hey, I have somebody that's interested too. And really got into the nitty gritty, got into Discord, talked to other people in the community on how to optimize setups, and started getting them on the rooftop, started looking like topography maps to find locations that were highly elevated to get the signal out and maximize rewards. And I grew that to about 75 rooftop installs across the Midwest, all while working a full-time job. So it was quite a grind. And then once I had that set up, it's like other projects are going to see what's possible as far as being able to scale through DePIN. So I started really researching the space and trying to find other projects that I could replicate those efforts with, now that I had a system down. And that's where I found a project called Hive Mapper. They're building the freshest street level imagery map that exists, and essentially put a dash cam in your windshield and get token rewards for collecting data. Same kind of mindset there. I'm like, okay, this project I think is going to have legs. How can I build out a host share model with this? And the more you drive, the better. And the more differentiated routes you drive, the better. So I started just pitching my Uber and Lyft drivers. I'll tell you what.
In a ride, and you'd be like, "Hey, set this thing up. We'll split the rewards." Is that how you were pitching Uber drivers?
Yeah, it was a little rough at the beginning, especially because you have to remember this was during the bear market, like right after the FTX debacle. Like even bringing up the word crypto, people were like, "Oh no, I'm not interested." So over time, I got my sales pitch down, and I figured out a way to explain it in a way that didn't turn people off, that made sense to them. And I actually, so not want to get ahead of myself, but I have a YouTube channel that I have a video that is essentially a sales training on how to recruit Uber and Lyft drivers for a Hivemapper fleet. But I ironed out a really solid sales pitch, and I've grown that to around 100 drivers across the U.S. I have some even in South America as well. And then Demo, right? So Demo, you connect your vehicle. It allows you to unlock your telematics data and essentially leverage it and create a relationship with that data in different ways. You earn tokens for doing so. And I already had my Helium build out. I had my Hivemapper fleet, so I could just tap into the people I was already working with, and I'd already introduced crypto to them. So as a natural progression and scaled up, but say I've got about 250 vehicles on my Demo fleet. So I started building out these side businesses, and they started to really grow. And my job had become like incredibly stressful. We had some leadership issues, and it got to the point where I was doing just as well with my side businesses. And earlier this year, I decided, you know what, I'm going to go full in on this. I think we are in the midst of this shift that's taking place, and this sector is really going to grow. I'm going to give it my all and see where it goes. So super exciting, man. No regrets. It was a little bit of an adjustment going from working 2 full-time jobs and having someone else telling you what to do all the time to having to be self-motivated. And I had to come up with a structure that worked for me. And I'm probably working more than I was, but I'm doing what I love to do. Super exciting, man. And that kind of brings me to the YouTube channel. So I was out visiting Ariel. He's the CEO of Hivemapper. And I was out for a wedding in California. So I dropped into the office. And he said, "What are you doing to build out your fleet?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" I was like, "I'm just like pitching my Uber and Lyft drivers." And he's like, "Other people are having a little bit more difficulty." And this is early days of Hivemapper. So I gave him my spiel, and I was just sitting there. I remember that night I went to the wedding, and I'm like, man, I did a lot of national sales trainings at my last job. And I was like, I bet I could create videos on how I've built out these side hustles to help others get into this space. I didn't know how to like record or edit videos. I took a course on Udemy for that too and figured it out. But yeah, that's why I created my channel, man. And it's grown. I've gotten some traction, and now I've been able to cover a lot of projects and interviewed, like what you're doing, interviewed some of the founders on my channel, and it's been really fun, man. So excited to see where it goes from here.
Yeah, well, it's been amazing watching your content journey and learning. It's really inspirational, because I think one of the challenges with crypto in a lot of respects is that it doesn't feel tangible. There's a lot of speculation associated with it. And part of what I really love about DePIN is the fact that you can buy something that becomes an asset that generates an income, regardless of the token speculation price. It becomes an income for you. And so the fact that you have been able to turn that into a business, or multiple businesses really, I think is amazing. And I'm seeing other people get 1 or 2 or 3 deployments, and I'm having these conversations like, you can make a full-time living doing this if you're dedicated, and you're a proof point of that happening in real time, and you're documenting your journey throughout the process, which is amazing. One of the other things that I think is super interesting is, I love the Steve Jobs quote where he says, "You can never connect the dots looking forward, but you can always connect them looking back." And it's really incredible to hear that you started in finance, you were doing solar, and then the drones with the topography mapping. All of those skill sets are just lessons that you probably had in life, I'm sure have been really applicable. And one of the other things that I know we're going to talk a bit about is, I'm sure that's been useful for you as you're analyzing projects, especially ones that may have some overlap with those sectors. But you're really taking a strategic or an analytical approach to these projects. And I just think that's so fascinating how all of that kind of connected for you.
Yeah, man, it's funny because, like you said, looking back, because at the time, like, I had no idea where this was going to go. It's like, man, I'm interested in the crypto space. I didn't think that 4 years later I'd be able to leave my job, have multiple businesses introduced. I've been able to introduce hundreds of people into the crypto space that would have never, well, most of them probably would not have exposure today. And they didn't have any skin in the game. I made the investment. I did, to your point, the research so I felt confident in making the investment. But to think now, like, I have a YouTube video, I'm like interviewing the CEOs of these projects, is like, Sometimes I like wake up and I'm like, man, this is like pretty wild, because 4 years ago, like, there's no way in heck I thought I'd be where I am right now. But yeah, it's exciting. You have a similar journey, right? Where you're growing your platform too. And I think it's such a cool space. And also to your point, yes, something tangible. That's when it comes to DePIN, that's why it really resonated with me, is because these are projects that a lot of them actually, the idea existed before they came to DePIN. They joined DePIN because the token incentive model can help them scale in ways they wouldn't be able to otherwise. For that reason, a lot of these concepts can resonate with normal everyday people that aren't in the weeds in the crypto space. And when you can bring non-crypto people into your platform, you're multiplying your target audience by like 20x. I want to say, the last I looked, I believe globally, now in the US, the adoption rate's much higher, but I think globally it's 6% of people have crypto assets at this point. So we're still super early, but just looking at that, if you can attract non-crypto people into your project, like you've expanded your target audience so much. And it's one of the things I really love about the DePIN space, and that there's real utility. And that's something that's been missing from crypto for a while, is because, to your point, yeah, it's been very speculative. Not to say that none of that speculation is right, but I think with the way these DePIN projects work, they're driving real revenue. And we'll touch on that when we talk about how I analyze these projects. But
yeah, I know I'm excited to talk about that. But you're 100% right. Actually, last February, I was able to give a presentation at ETH Denver. Everybody talks about onboarding the next billion people into Web3. And the sort of thesis of my presentation was DePIN is going to be the category to do it, because you're 100% right. You're able to scale these networks on the demand and the supply side in new and novel ways. But the other thing is that for people that are just accessing them, it's a real product. I gave a couple examples. The first one was my wife has a Helium mobile plan, and that was either paying $70 with T-Mobile, or I'm paying a fraction of that with Helium. It's the same service, and it's a lot more resilient when the network goes down if you're actually on one of the hotspots, so you don't have the centralization problem. So it just checks so many of those boxes. And again, we're seeing that happen. Demo's a really great example. My mom had a check engine light that came in on her car, plug the demo in. Like, you would have just bought a device anyway, but the fact that you can generate tokens from the telemetry data that it's collecting, in addition to just working as like an OBD2 reader, that's amazing, right? But in any event, I want to talk a little bit about some of the turning points for you before we go into analyzing projects. I think you really do serve as an inspiration for what DePIN can enable in terms of becoming a new category of business, or becoming a business owner in this sense. You talked about your job was getting a little bit mundane, but at what point did you feel comfortable that this was something you could sustain as a full-time income for you and, ditch the day job?
yes, I get asked this question quite a bit. For one, I would say because I started these alongside my job, so, the income had grown alongside my job, it made that decision a lot easier. It can be difficult if you're working a full-time job and want to start your own business, and you're taking a leap of faith and starting from scratch, and you have that down period without any income. I had not planned on leaving my job yet. I wanted to stick around a little bit longer just for the financial security side of things, but it had gotten to the point where it was just putting out fires every day, starting to impact like my mental health and the way I was like interacting with people outside of my job. Yeah. So I got to my breaking point where I was like, man, I'm done. And I have to say I made the right decision, because they talked me into taking a extended leave of absence for 90 days. And I was like, okay, I'll give you guys an opportunity to get your stuff together, and then I can decide if I want to come back or not. And ultimately made a decision not to come back. And then actually 6 months after I left, they ended up going bankrupt. So this is like the longest running solar company globally. But I'd seen the writing on the wall. But you're always, when you first make the decision, I'd say I did wake up the next day and it was this weird feeling like, okay, now I'm self-employed. Like, I don't have this guaranteed paycheck. And then, I have family members that, of course, they're very supportive, but they're like, are you sure you want to make this decision? And like, people around you are going to kind of question, like, oh, I just won a national MVP award. I do a really good paying job. And they're like, are you sure you're making the right call? So, those questions do kind of enter, but I felt very confident, I think mainly because it's something that I was passionate about. And I have confidence in the fact that if I really do set my mind to something, I know I can achieve it. And I'd also managed to save up a good amount of money to give myself some padding too. So where I wasn't like stressed out to pay my bills the next month or anything of that nature, right? So I put the wheels in motion for a while. But I would say this is a conversation I have a lot. And I was back in St. Louis this last week, and actually probably dating myself here, but I had my 20-year high school anniversary or reunion rather. And there's a few people I talked to that are like, hey, I'm really thinking about jumping on and starting my own business. And it's like, well, look, if it's something you're passionate about, okay, because if you're going to do this, like you have to really commit yourself to it and live and breathe it. Okay. It can't just be for money reasons. Like you have to really love what you're doing. But if it's something you're passionate about, man, I mean, it's worth taking a shot, I think. And for me, after I left my job, the people around me, they're like, man, like you're back to your old self again. Like you're happy again. For a while, we could tell you were super stressed. I would say if you're thinking about it, put together a plan, make sure it's something that you're really going to be passionate about and love doing. And I do think it's worth taking a chance on yourself, frankly. And it's been great for me so far. So,
yeah, inspiring advice. I'm really interested to learn about how you're looking and analyzing these different projects. But one of the other things I'm curious about from the business owner side of things, for those that are looking at this as a potential career path, it's kind of funny, like people want to become YouTubers and become influencers and all of these different things. And in a few years, everybody's going to want to be DePIN business owners. I think there's just so much opportunity. But as you were scaling your businesses, because you've got different deployments, and so I don't want to lump everything all together, but this is a nascent industry, as you explained. There's not a lot of, you're sort of building everything from scratch. How did you start building some of the systems, whether it was for tracking and doing splits? Like, can you just talk through some of the high level details for someone that's looking at this as, I want to jump in, but I don't even know where to start?
Yeah. So first off, and we'll talk about this when I do the analysis of the project. I look at the project and identify, okay, is this project going to be able to earn enough to make sense to invest in it, is the first thing. And then, okay, is there a route for me to build out a profit share model? Can I get hosts that are going to be able to optimize the earnings for that particular project? Okay, so that's the first thing I think about. And HiveMapper is a good example of that with Uber and Lyft drivers. And then I had a target in mind of how much I wanted to grow that, and did my analysis. Okay, what's my capital investment going to look like with the equipment? And what's my potential payback period, and what's the upside here? Some of this is timing too, though. I mean, we have this 4-year market cycle, and am I going to be able to accumulate over the next couple of years, knowing what I believe is going to come, right? And so there's always some question marks, but a lot of it is like doing that analysis. Now, as far as like the token split goes, it's very dependent on the project, because like with HiveMapper, at least to this point, now this is changing, it's going to be a lot more passive, but it requires drivers to, as it stands today, have an app open, download imagery, upload imagery every day, and it's not completely passive. So in that case, I do a 50-50 split. I've seen people that when the market was way up, were trying to do 80-20 splits where the owner of the business was taking 80%. I'm like, man, that could backfire if we see the market come down to earth a little bit. And frankly, if the driver is out there driving every day, I think it's fair that they get a higher percentage. Now, with Helium, though, I did 80% to myself and 20% to them. For one, the cost of the install was a little bit higher, so the payback period is going to be a little bit longer, but it's also completely passive. It sits there. They don't even have to remember that it's there, right? It's just an antenna on the roof. So in that case, I think you can justify taking a larger percentage. Demo, I think you could justify taking a larger percentage as well, because again, it's very passive. You plug it in, they don't have to do anything. Like a lot of the people I'll hang out with, some friends I've set these up with, they're like, oh, I forgot that thing's even in my car. So if it's very passive on the host side, I think you can justify taking a higher percentage. So I think it depends on how much involvement there is from the host as far as how I set up the splits. And then I do set up LLCs, right? Separate LLCs for each business. For one, it allows you, at least in the US, to expense all your equipment, your mining equipment, and there's some tax benefits there. Yeah. But additionally, you want to keep things above board, right? So I have 1099 agreements with my hosts. It took a lot of research, talking to my attorney, my accountant, et cetera. I actually have video on how the steps that I took to set up my businesses and things that you wouldn't expect, like setting up a bank account. I had to go to, this is 4 years ago, but I had to go to 4 different banks to find a bank that would even bank with me, because it was a crypto company. A lot of them didn't want to touch it. So I found a small regional bank that would allow me to bank with them, but really getting things set up legitimately and then analyzing the projects and then looking at each project specifically and how that split will work and the steps that I went forward with.
Yeah. And are you tracking where they're at, like on a spreadsheet, and what's your communication channel for all of your different hosts? Because you mentioned you had like over 100 Hive mappers and demos. Like, there's a lot of boots on the ground folks you got to stay in contact with. What's your plan or strategy for just keeping it all managed and communicating with them? Can you just share some high level info on that?
Sure. Like Helium was a pain at first because it was all manual payments, but I used Hotspotty. So Hotspotty created a platform that I was able to set up, and I can run commission reports and easily send out payouts. And I was doing monthly email blasts to every one of my hosts, giving them updates on the market. Now I'm like, hey, just set up alerts on my YouTube channel because I do updates on there. With Honey, with Hive Mapper, it's a spreadsheet. I have a video tutorial on how I set that all up on my channel and tracking that, how to go to SolScan to look on chain at the different transactions and calculate everything. I actually created a calculator I shared through my OneDrive in the description of my video to help people around that. Demo is probably the most manual process. I go into the app and I look at the reward section, and I have an Excel sheet that I put their total rewards in, and I have formulas in there to take the difference. I hope it's not always such a manual process, but right now it is. So it is, again, like creating your own playbook, because none of this stuff exists. Like, you have to figure out how to do it. That's a big reason why I put these tutorials on my YouTube channel, because I can help people shorten their learning curve. But it was a lot of trial and error and figuring this stuff out on the front end. But then once you have a process down, then it's easy to expand. So, the beginning stages, like generally what I do is I'll order a small amount of equipment. When I say small, normally I'll start with 10 devices or something, get my process down, get my pitch down, referral system, payout system, all that stuff ironed out. And then I'll expand from there. Because that is the hardest part, it's the very beginning. And then it's definitely a snowball effect, because you start getting a lot of referrals, but you don't want to expand to like 50 hosts and not have your systems down. That could be a freaking disaster. So, I would recommend starting a little bit small and then expanding from there.
Yeah, that's super great. I do deployments as well. So these are learning pains that you're going through. And I love hearing how other people are looking at that, especially because it does vary from project to project. And you're doing it at a scale where you figure that out. I also think it's kind of ironic in a sense that you started learning all of these different new interesting things through Udemy. You're becoming effectively that for DePIN with your YouTube channel. So you're paying it forward, if you will, which is awesome to see in so many respects. I'm really fascinated, outside of just how you're building your deployment businesses, how you're looking at new projects. I think your analyst perspective, or just how you're approaching these different projects, is really important. And you look at some factors between revenue and the team, token economics, all of these things. Can you unpack for the listeners really how you start analyzing these projects, maybe what you're looking at for specific metrics, some tools, kind of dig into all of that for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So the number one thing I look at first for a project is, what market are they moving into? Because I think we're at this point right now with DePIN where we now know that token incentive models can help build the supply side, or in other words, get participants. But it doesn't matter if you're getting people to put an antenna on their roof, or you're getting people to collect data. That doesn't matter if you can't drive revenue. And I think that's going to be a huge differentiator in this market cycle. As DePIN grows, we're going to see a lot of these projects pop up. Some of them are going to do a really good job of selling hardware and making money on their hardware and building supply. But if they can't connect the demand side and drive revenue, that project's not going to be around. And maybe the token will pump. I want to do everything I can to avoid those scenarios. So I think it's really important to do proper research right now, especially with the way this sector is growing. So number one thing I look at is, okay, what's the total addressable market? Okay, let's look at GeoNet, for example. They're moving into the RTK industry, right? Just real quickly, when you get your location, you connect to satellite systems. There's really four global systems. US has one, Europe has one, Russia and China. They consist of like 24 or more satellites. You have to connect to 4 to get your location, but it's only accurate within a couple meters. So what GeoNet's doing is they're tapping into real-time kinematics or RTK data where you put an antenna down on the ground and it corrects for that margin of error where you can get centimeter level accuracy. So this industry today is, I want to say, $3 to $4 billion industry, was expected to see huge growth moving forward. So to me, I'm like, okay, that's a sizable industry. So that's the number one thing. Is it a growing industry? And it's expected to see growth. Number three, though, is going back to the sales mindset. What's the differentiator? Like, how are they going to grab market share? Because it's one thing wanting to move into a market. It's a whole nother thing thinking about what are those discussions, those conversations going to be like in the real world, trying to get people to use your network. Now, for GeoNet, their differentiators are, number one, it's a lower cost than the other RTK networks that are out there. Number two, using DePIN and the token incentive model, they're going to be able to get vastly better coverage than anyone else out there. So, if you're talking to a potential business to use your network, that's huge, right? Hey, you can use our network cheaper. You're also going to get coverage everywhere you need it. That's something that our competitors can't say. Okay, so for them, that's a clear path to grab market share. Number two is the participation, the supply side. Okay, and this is going to be different for every project. Going back to GeoNet as an example, can you get enough participation to move the needle? Okay, to get enough coverage. Now, in their case, and speaking with their team, they needed to get to about 10,000 base stations deployed to address 80 to 90% of the total global addressable market. And I was like, that's very attainable looking at their run rate. They've surpassed that now. They're at 11,000 base stations deployed. But, looking at that versus, say, Demo, and this is a really important distinction to make. When you only need 10,000 base stations deployed, you can afford to be a little bit higher cost. Maybe it's a little bit more technical to set up that base station, because that's not a huge number to achieve. Now, with Demo, there's not really this number that they need to hit. I mean, their target is to get 1 million vehicles connected by the end of 2025. They're at right around 120,000 today, but that's a much bigger number. Okay, the more the merrier, in other words. There's 1.4 billion vehicles on the road globally right now. I think given the years of the models that you can connect to and the types of vehicles you can connect to, I want to say Demo is eligible to connect to 850 million of those vehicles. So a huge market to tap into, but because you're going for such a big number of connections, you need to make it really easy and you need to realize it's going to be a lot more cost sensitive when you're trying to attract that many participants. So they've done that. They've made the process for connecting your vehicle super, super easy. And they brought down the cost of their model drastically. When I first joined, they were like $350 for their flagship model. They just introduced a new one at $170. So they've driven down their price. They're not trying to make profit on their equipment. Their goal is to drive down the price so they can grow the network, which is what you want to see. And then if you have a Tesla or a software-enabled vehicle, you can connect for free. Okay, so again, it starts with how many participants are needed to move the needle to get that addressable market. And then depending on the number of participants, is the team doing the things they need to do? Is there a path to get that participation? So the next thing is the team. So this is so important. And this is not just for crypto projects. Like, this is for really any business. You need to be able to have a team that can execute and pull it all together, because you can have a great idea. You can have a path to the participation you need, but if you don't have a team that's able to pull it all together and execute on the back end, none of that matters at all. I look at the team bios on their website, of course, but I go to their LinkedIn. I look at their work history. I want to see that they have, it doesn't necessarily have to be relatable, but I want to see that they have a history of success in the past and that they're going to be committed to the project. You look at GeoNet as an example again. Mike Horton, guy's brilliant. He's been in the drone industry. He's worked with RTK in the past. He sold his last business for $50 million, like incredibly successful. And he's committed, right? And talking to him, like the guy, and it shows, right? So they've been able to create the demand, because you need a team that can go out and have these conversations to generate demand. They have the U.S. Department of Agriculture using GeoNet right now. So not just going out on the sales front, making sure that they can go and get customers, but also building out the tools, right? You want to see the team that is active on their social medias, that's continuing to ship out updates, right? And is active in the Discord. If you go into Discord and the team members are in there and very active with the community, like those are all really good signs. So those are things that I absolutely look out for. And then the last category is the tokenomics. So the main thing I'm looking for there is that there's a fair distribution of tokens. You normally have it split up between the team or the employees, the early investors, and participants. And participants meaning like people like you and me that are going to set up a base station or collect data. I want to see that there's a fair distribution of tokens amongst all the different participants in the project. But the other thing I really look at is what's the token unlock schedule for the team and employees, okay? Because it can be a red flag. I'm not saying every single time it is, but it can certainly be a red flag where the team is unlocking all of their tokens in like the first 2 years.
Yeah.
I'm like a big put your money where your mouth is. Like you can say, hey, we're in this for the long run. We're committed to the project. But if you're so committed, why do you have to have all your tokens unlocked in the first 2 years? I think that's worth questioning. Again, I'm not saying it's like end all be all, but it's something worth looking at. And DEMA is a great example of this, where they actually extended out their token unlock schedule for employees and the team a number of years. And to me, I'm like, okay, that shows they are really committed to this for the long run. So I think the tokenomics are certainly very important as well. So I kind of piece all those things together and then identify which projects I'm interested in. And then from there, it's okay, can I build a deployment business off of this? Or should I just invest in the token? And then go from there. So I do a mix of both. There are projects where I have substantial investment in the token of the project. There's others that obviously I've built out businesses off of them.
Yeah, that's such valuable information. And it is tricky when you're coming into something for the first time because there are a lot of different components between how big's the market, the team being competent or capable of actually delivering on this. There was a couple questions that were firing off in my brain. One is something that's been interesting to me is the sort of the duration for reaching a mature network and ecosystem does vary from project to project. Like some people don't know this, but Helium's been around since like 2013, I think is when they initially started the company. They pivoted into the blockchain stuff in 2019, and seeing that network maturity, and I don't even think we've necessarily hit that yet. You know, these are timelines that are quite long. Other projects like GeoNet, for example, sounds like they're hitting that critical mass, if you will, a little bit more quickly. How are you evaluating the token vesting schedule in relationship to the network hitting a maturity point where it's okay for team members to start exiting their token holdings, if you will? How do you evaluate that from a token economic standpoint?
No, it's a great point, because when you're looking at infrastructure plays, now GeoNet kind of started at the back end of the bull run, the last bull run, so they've been around for a little while. But these infrastructure plays like GeoNet, like Helium, they take longer because you have to build the network first. And then like for Helium, for example, you know, the IoT network, I mean, they went from like 15,000 hotspots to 1 million in 18 months, which was like remarkable in the midst of like supply shortages. I mean, it's absolutely crazy what they're able to do. But, you know, the network had to be built, and then you had to have manufacturers build devices that could connect to the network. They're not going to build its devices until the network's there. So when you're looking at infrastructure plays, you have to be a little bit more patient, I guess is the way I'd put it. And that in those projects, having a team that's committed for the long run is super important. And do they have enough financial backing to get through a bear market? Because they might not be able to turn on revenue right away. So those infrastructure plays. Render's another, the GPU network, Wingbits is another one I'll touch on in a moment. But I think it's more critical to look at the long-term viability of the project. Like I believe Helium going into the last bear market, they said they had something like 7 or 8 years of runway with their funding. That's a good thing because you need that in an infrastructure play. Now, when you're looking at a demo or a Hive mapper where they're collecting data, they can turn on revenue a lot faster with data collection, especially with the emergence of AI, because AI now can make that data very valuable. Whereas before, you'd have to have people sorting through the data. You can get inundated with too much data. The emergence of AI is going to be huge for a lot of these projects. But for the sensor category is what they call it, where you have sensors collecting data, that I think you're going to be able to see revenue get turned on in the first market cycle. And that's what we're seeing already with HiveMapper. I think we're about to start seeing that in Demo. They have a lot of people building apps and their platform now. Yeah, for me, it's really, is it an infrastructure play? Is it going to be a couple market cycles to get that revenue going? Or is it a data play where they can get it going a little bit sooner? And based on that timeline, then I would look at the employee unlocks differently, probably.
Sure. Another aspect to the token economics, which relates to the revenue piece, how are you evaluating the reduction side with respect to burning tokens? Like, are there any leading indicators that you're able to use or share with people that are important factors for knowing that the token emissions effectively won't dilute everything to be having diminishing returns from the token appreciation standpoint?
Yeah, I always look at CoinMarketCap. I look at the white paper and the token unlock schedule. So when I'm doing price projections, first off, you need to have a time frame in mind. In many cases, I have expected, looking back 4 years, like, okay, middle of 2025 is when I expected the height of the bull run. So looking at price projections, you can, if you have a timeline in mind, you can then look at the token unlock schedule to see how many tokens will be in circulation. And from there, you can calculate what the potential market cap could be and therefore the price of each token. So that's when I'm doing a price projection. Now, the verdict's still a little bit out on the token burn side because we haven't seen, we're starting to see the revenue come in, but we haven't seen which token burn model is going to be the best. Okay, Helium has one where tokens are burned, but then redistributed. Once you hit a certain amount of a burn, it becomes deflationary. And you can't mint as many tokens as what's being burned. GeoNet, on the other hand, is completely deflationary. They believe it's 90% of the revenue just goes to permanent token burns. So they've already burned almost 1% of their total token supply already, and we're seeing revenue on a very positive trajectory. HiveMapper, they just announced they're going to double the amount of tokens that are burned with revenues. I think the main thing is following those trends right now. Are the token burns taking place? Is revenue coming into the project? And is it on a positive trajectory? Because that's ultimately what we want to see. I think we'll have to wait and see which token burn process is the best or model is the best. And it might not be a perfect one. Maybe it's dependent on the project. But that's something that I'm super excited to see. And I think this market cycle, we're going to start seeing that, what they call the flywheel effect, take place. And I do believe because of that flywheel effect, we may see some of these DePIN projects break away to an extent, from this 4-year market cycle. Because in the past, a lot of it's just speculation was around the Bitcoin halving every 4 years. If all of a sudden you have real revenue coming in, that's creating buying pressure on the token in a token burn, they can be self-sufficient and decouple from the market cycle sentiment to an extent. Not to say it won't be impacted at all, but I think it can be insulated for sure.
Sure. I always look back at just crypto as a category, and you lack so much of that real revenue side that actually helps create a flight to safety, if you will, for the token being sustainable outside of just these market cycles. And the verdict is still out, to your point, but we're doing some research papers and some financial modeling with different projects to see where we think things might land. And I'm very interested. Obviously we don't want token prices to crash, but it will be a great indicator of the long-term viability of DePIN to see how, when the market does go down, if that revenue offset with the burn mechanisms will create enough deflationary pressure to have token stability. So it'll be amazing to see. What tools are you leveraging or looking at? Obviously, there's so many indicators, there's so many data points that are part of your analysis. Are there any tools that you can share with folks that are helpful in your analysis journey?
Yeah, actually, I'm going to share my screen here. So number one is finding the projects. Okay, so there's some really good resources out there. DePIN Hub's great, DePINHub.io. They have the different subcategories of different DePIN projects. You see, it's amazing how many projects there are now in DePIN. So it's a great starting point to find the projects. Also, you have Masari. They put out really good industry reports, not just DePIN all across all of crypto, but they do really fantastic analysis. A couple of podcasts. Oh, sorry, I forgot. Who Loves Burrito? Okay, this is a single guy that hosts this website. and he ranks the different projects based on ROI. He's a deployer himself, and he's got a lot of other really cool data on his website. So really fantastic resource. And here are the podcasts. So Unleashing DePIN and DePIN Hub. So y'all, this is, in a lot of cases, like 30 minutes, sometimes a little bit longer, sometimes shorter, but I've been able to find projects I would never have found if I didn't listen to these podcasts. So if I'm driving, if I'm traveling, these are really good to listen to. And I listen to these podcasts to do research for my videos a lot too, because you get to hear from the founder of the project. And sometimes there's some nuggets in there that, maybe haven't been broadcast in their Discord or on their Twitter. You'll hear some things and get into the mind of the founder of the project, which I think is really critically important. And just finding out about projects too that would have been hard to find otherwise. Highly, highly recommend listening to both of these podcasts. And then CoinMarketCap. So you can sort by category. So in this case, I have it sorted by DePIN, sorted by market cap. And you can pull up an individual project. So I created this deck back in August. So DEMO's up quite a bit from there. I think it's up to 23 cents now. It's at 13 back then. But you can see things like the price of the token. You can see the total supply. How many tokens are in circulation now? What's the market cap, fully diluted market cap? So those certainly are good for doing price projections. But the other thing I'll say is this markets tab. So especially if you're new to crypto, it's not like you can just go to your Charles Schwab account and just buy a stock, right? Especially the projects that are newer, they might not have a centralized exchange listing. And frankly, that's sometimes where you have the most upside, because once they get a centralized exchange listing, it's a lot easier to buy. Normally you'll see the price go up quite a bit. Like GeoNet doesn't have a centralized exchange, a huge centralized exchange listing in the US yet. I'm trying to think, there's another one too. Oh, Dynex is another one. So you have to sometimes go to a decentralized exchange, but here you can see where's the token available for purchase. So this is really important information if you're looking to invest in the token itself. And then touched on some of this, but the white paper. So on the website, I always read through the white paper. It's basically a prospectus for a business. It's going to give you kind of the businesses, like the whole business plan, if you will, what their goals are for deployments, how many base stations, for example, they might want to set up. A lot of times you'll be able to read about the team in there. You'll be able to read how the token burn mechanism works, et cetera. So really important information. I already talked about the team, so that's really important. The media section is really good too. It's going to give you any recent news. So you'll be able to see any big customer announcements, any new investments, rounds that they've gotten, et cetera. So good to see that they have recent events that have taken place. The tokenomics, sometimes that's in the white paper, but a lot of times they'll have a separate section where you can read the full details. And then social media is really important. So I like to see how active they are on Twitter. If you go into Discord, some are on Telegram, most are in Discord. That's a really good resource for a couple of reasons. For one, you can interact with the team members directly in most cases. A lot of times the CEO will be in there on a regular basis. But if you're looking to be a deployer, you can connect with other people from the community and get a lot of cult knowledge, if you will, on how to do a setup that would probably, for me, like optimizing my Helium setups, connecting with other team members that had gone through the trial and error and figured out how to run PoE to the roof, and you need a lightning arrestor and you need this antenna. Like, you can shorten your learning curve so much by going into Discord, and other people in the community are normally really helpful. So those are really the main areas that I would recommend. I'm trying to think of what, and then, this is my project. We already talked about this and how I analyze projects, but those are the main resources I would recommend checking out as far as finding the project and then finding the data that's necessary to do the analysis.
Yeah, that's great. What tool are you using for looking at revenue? I've got a personal pick. Is there something that you're using?
There are a couple of platforms that track. Every project normally has their own dashboard too. So I have all the dashboards generally tabbed that I can check. So they normally have a lot of metrics for their individual project that you can track. I actually have some tabs when we go through some of the projects. I have some tabs open here that I'll be able to walk you through. Which ones do you look at, Tyler?
I use DePIN Ninja from the EV3 teams. It's really well laid out. They've got a ton. I think they've got 1,800 projects in their database, and so they're ranking them by revenue, and they've got some other relevant metrics. So that's a tool that I've been spending a lot of time on, in addition to all the other ones that you shared, because that to me was a great snapshot for finding the current revenue based on any of the chain analysis. And then it's nice because it's aggregated, so I don't have to go through and look at all the individual projects specifically. But that's one I've been using a lot lately.
Yeah, that's a phenomenal resource for sure. Because again, we're moving this area, like the revenue generation, and it's the revenue for sure, but the trend is what I'm most concerned about. I want to see that things are trending upward. Okay.
Right.
If you see that they peaked on their revenue 6 months ago and it's been going the wrong direction, like that probably is a reason for concern. But if you see that things are moving in the right direction, that's obviously a very good thing. Now, it could be that things are moving in the wrong direction because maybe they are in the process of developing a new hardware device, or maybe there's a reason for that, but it's something to look into for sure. But yeah, those revenue trends are huge if you're going to analyze these projects.
Yeah, I'm really excited to look at some of these projects you're doing research on and that you're excited about. But one of the other questions that was in the back of my mind, I'd actually started writing an article on this that I never finished. And I saw, ironically today on Twitter, someone posted a research article around the different categories on the demand side of customers for DePIN projects, specifically whether it's like a B2B style play or direct consumer, where people are like a Helium plan where you're roaming onto the network, versus maybe like carrier offload, for example. How much are you factoring that into your analysis of these different projects, whether it's like there's 3 potential buyers that could be on the demand side, or whether it's thousands of potential customers, or if it's just a true B2C play? How much does that factor into your overall analysis of these projects, if it does at all?
It certainly does, to the extent that for me, whether it's a B2C or B2B play is less important as how big is the market that they're attacking. So if it's a B2C play, that could be a $3 billion market, and they have a differentiator that can grab market share, then I care more about that than whether it's B2B or B2C, frankly. Yeah, it's more so, is that revenue attainable? Is it, how much revenue is there? And some are tackling both, right? Like Wingbits, for example, like they're collecting flight data. I'll talk more about that in a minute, but they're going after airlines that are going to be able to use that data, insurance companies, but there's also a B2C play where there's flight enthusiasts that will pay subscriptions for flight data. So again, I think it comes down to how big is the market and can they grab market share? Do they have a differentiator to do? And I guess from the standpoint of if it's B2B or B2C, if it's B2B, I think that having a solid sales team is going to be far more important to be able to go out and get customers. B2C is probably more of a marketing effort, frankly, than people out there hitting the pavement and being on the sales side.
Yeah, that's really the crux of why I asked it, because it does change the team dynamic a little bit. What are their strengths in terms of going out and getting success? Because I'm always trying to understand, okay, if the TAM is X, what does it look like to actually get there? Does it mean you need to have, killer BD people and you need 2 or 3 deals to make that happen? Or does it mean you need really killer marketing and get a few 100,000 customers that are directly on the consumer side? And so it's interesting to hear you say that, because from how I look into analyzing these projects is, what are the team strengths and how are they lending to unlocking the potential revenue based on the model within the network? And so it's cool to hear your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, I think we're aligned on that for sure. And I've had conversations with teams where I'm like, what's your sales team look like? Do you have in a lot of cases, the CEO has been in the industry, so they have relationships they can leverage. Like Ariel with HiveMapper, he's been in mapping for 30 something years. So he has a lot of relationships to leverage. Same with Mike Horton over at GeoNet. That's how they're getting in with the U.S. Department of Agriculture and some of these big name customers. I think it's a combination of, to your point, the makeup of the team. Do they have ins with these different businesses? And then do they have salespeople that can really go in there and leverage it? And then in some cases, like Dynex, which I'll touch on more in a minute, but they're going into quantum computing. They actually have people on staff that can help these companies learn how to use the technology, because a lot of them, it's new to them, right? They don't have someone on staff that knows how to utilize quantum computing. So they're like, okay, we need to add somebody to help onboard these people. I think, yeah, having the staff on board that can attack that market is really important.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It certainly mitigates the counterparty risk of relying on the projects to actually go out and do what they're intending on after they've built the network. How do you start monetizing it? So I think we're certainly on the same page there. Speaking of projects, what projects are you looking at? Are there any kind of case studies that you can share or things that you're currently analyzing and excited about that you're able to share for folks listening?
Yeah, I've got a bunch of tabs full up here. I'm going to go through my top 10 plays.
Let's go through your top 10. Brad's top 10.
Yes, this is where
that everybody's waiting for.
This is where I have my largest holdings, man. Like I've over the last 4 years been building up my positions. I mean, this is where what I have, man. So number one, starting off with helium. I think it's important to start off with helium because again, they've been inspiration for a lot of other projects. I also strongly believe that we're going to have some institutional interest and investment in DePIN, and I believe that helium is going to likely be the project that draws that institutional interest. And I think we're going to see that then flow into other DePIN projects. Talk about a comeback story, man. In the last market cycle, helium faced a lot of criticism because, again, as we talked about, they had to build the infrastructure first and then the revenue came. Now we're seeing the revenue, okay? If you look at the trajectory that's taking place here, that's exactly what you want to see at this daily revenue. And things are just growing, right? So we're looking at where it's at. I'm not going to do a price projection here, but let's say it's $8.86. This thing got down to $1.20 in the bear market, man. Oh man, talk about a no-brainer. But yeah, $1.5 billion market cap. In the last market cycle, I'll say that it did get up to, I think, $4.7 billion. So we're still very well below the last market cycle. I'm not saying that we'll definitely get there, but they are making moves. They just also voted to have all the tokens reconsolidated into the HNT token, which I think was a great move. I wish they had never broken it up in the first place, but just some history there. They created sub-tokens for IoT and for mobile. Now it's back to HNT. I think that's very bullish for the token. We've seen some great price action over the last couple of weeks, but I think this is going to be a really solid project moving forward. Next one's HiveMapper. They've now hit 29% of the world's roads maps. So seeing some really positive traction there. Same thing. You're looking at here the consumption with data credits. This is people using the data on the network. This is talking about a hockey stick curve. This is what you want to see. Not to mention that, let's see. Okay, again, this is we just hit a record for the token burns from revenue. And Ariel just came out. They just last week signed 3 new contracts, 6-figure contracts with new customers. Okay, things are moving in the right direction there. They're about to launch and start shipping their B model, which is going to be a completely passive process now. You don't have to have the app open. It's going to be connected to LTE network, so it'll automate. You just stick the thing in your windshield. Talk about how much easier it's going to be growing a fleet where you can just stick this in the window. You have to coach them on how to upload data. There's also some on-chain evidence that would suggest there might be a Binance listing coming. We don't know for sure, but that would be huge. So looking at Honey token, 8.5 cents, $250 million market cap. One thing I think that I really like about HiveMapper is for new people that are going to be coming in and investing, and as the DePIN rotation comes, which I fully expect to happen, this is a concept, going head to head with Google Maps, putting a camera in your car, getting tokens for collecting street level imagery. This is going to make sense and resonate with a lot of people that are new to crypto. So I think of a lot of interest from new investors. Demo, a huge fan of Demo. They're coming up on 120,000 vehicles connected to the network. They have their new flagship model it's actually starting to ship now, actually. $169. I have a promo code on my page. I don't know, Tyler, you might have one as well, but you can get like 20% off if you use one of our promo codes to get connected. If you have a Tesla or a software-enabled vehicle, you can download the app and connect for free and start earning tokens every Monday. But what Demo is doing is creating this network of connected vehicles, allowing you to unlock your telematics data, which is really valuable. And then if you build it, they will come type of situation where once the network grows, they're going to be able to attract developers in their ecosystem to build useful applications. And we're seeing this. So right here, this is their growth in developer licenses. These are people developers building applications within the Demo ecosystem. Looking back to July to August, they launched their new developer dashboard to make it easier to build. And now you see this positive trajectory. These are people building. This is huge. So as people build applications, the revenue comes in, they're going to see solid growth. They want to get to 1 million vehicles by the end of 2025. I think they can do it. It's definitely a big goal, but super exciting stuff happening with Demo right now. If you look at their token, they're right around 22 cents, $62 million market cap. This thing back in last spring got up to 70 cents, I want to say, somewhere around there. I'm very bullish on this project. I have 250 vehicles connected on Demo. So very excited to see where that goes. Dynex is the next one. So they're doing quantum computing. Essentially, it's called neuromorphic computing. So they're able to run models 10 times faster than standard compute. They're getting into pharmaceutical for like protein folding and developing new drugs. They're working in the F1 for developing their cars and running different models. Same with aerospace, working on designing airplanes, and then financial models, right? So again, the usage trend. So October, there were a total of 21,000 compute jobs completed. It jumped up to over 70,000 completed compute jobs in November. So massive usage coming. And if you look at how many GPUs are on the network today, let's see, 58,000 GPUs. As the usage of the network grows, as the token, we'll see, I think it'll appreciate. No, not financial advice. I think you'll see the GPUs added, and I think you'll see more and more of this, more usage on the network. I'm very bullish on Dynex.
Quick question on Dynex, by the way. From your involvement side, are you holding the token? I'm not super familiar with Dynex. So how do you actually, I assume with quantum computers, it's not like you can just buy one and set one up in your home. How do you actually get involved with the network itself?
If you have a GPU, you can get set up. Yeah. So they've got a chip that I'm trying to think. So it combines the processing and the memory to make it more efficient in running models. So they have a specific technology that they developed that allows them to run these models faster. So yeah, you can mine the token with a standard GPU and get onboarded onto their network. I personally had just bought a lot of the token. So it doesn't have any centralized exchange listings yet in the US or any major ones. Based on some of the stuff I've heard from interviews with the team, I believe one is coming, and it's its own layer one. The easiest exchanges to get listed on, crypto.com and Kraken. Coinbase generally is a little bit more difficult, especially if you're on your own layer one. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see like a crypto.com listing coming, which would be very bullish, but it is available on Uniswap. So there's a wrapped token. That's how I've been buying it. It's just swapping ETH into the wrapped Dynex token. But again, you're looking at $36 million market cap. This thing is tapping into DePIN, DeSci with the pharmaceutical thing. DeSci is getting a lot of traction. I'm seeing it mentioned all over Twitter right now. It's tapping into AI as well. I'm very bullish on this project, especially seeing the usage trends that we're seeing. GeoNet. So we talked about this one already. Again, they're putting base stations down to get very precise location data. It's huge for agriculture, drone surveys, construction. This is actually a cool story. I'm in a Discord group, and one of the guys in there hit me up. He's, "Hey man, I know you've been covering GeoNet. I have a base station on my roof. I walked outside the other day to go to work, and there's a construction guy out there doing a survey." And I'm like, "Hey, what are you using RTK technology?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm using that antenna right on the roof right there." And he's like, "That's my antenna, man." Like, how cool is that?
Cool.
And they're estimating that I believe 50% of the base stations are getting daily usage. So this network is, they are doing incredible things, and you can see they've got great coverage. Again, I mentioned this earlier, working with the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and now they're really looking to expand into some of these countries without great coverage into some of these emerging markets. But again, no centralized exchange listing yet. Their founder is against the idea of centralized exchange listings because it does go against the whole concept of crypto in general. I get it, but right. I think he understands the importance to get investment. But regardless, if you look at the token burns here, going back in 2023, just climbing every month, right? The cumulative USD burn.
Yeah, that token burn statistic on the right there is certainly it's a graph shape that you like to see. That's
Yeah.
moving in the right direction.
Yeah, and you'll see here too, like it does level off right here. That's because as the token price appreciates, the revenue is still increasing, but less tokens are burned because the token price is appreciated. But you look at the US dollar burns, those are moving up every month.
Sure.
Was it last month, $135,000? And we're still so early with this project. I think that's one of my, I think a top 3 holding for me. Again, I just bought the token, but sitting at about 25 cents, under a $50 million market cap. And I imagine they do have a Gate.io exchange listing, so that's good. That means that they're going for centralized exchange listings. So it's another project, man, that I'm very bullish on. They're getting massive usage, amazing team. And they just announced a dual miner. You can now actually install a miner on your roof that mines both the GOD token and the Wingbits token, which hasn't been launched yet. They're having their mainnet likely in January. This is a really interesting network. I just put out a video on them. They're based out of Sweden. So aircrafts now are using something called ADS-B. It's automatic dependent surveillance, as I believe it stands for. So we used to use radars to track flights. And they still do use radar technology, but now aircrafts in pretty much every country are required, as of the last few years, to have this transmitter on their aircraft to send a signal out. And it's a combination of its location using satellites and a bunch of the instrument data on board, including like weather data and stuff. So it's sending out a signal a couple times a second. So basically continuous signal, but you need to be able to capture that data. Mm-hmm. And that's where Wingbits comes in, is that they are incentivizing with tokens people to set up these antennas to capture this flight data. And now you'll be able to set up a device that captures flight data for Wingbits and sets up the RTK network for GeoNet. You get both tokens, so pretty freaking cool. And this data is really valuable. So it's going to allow airlines to better optimize fuel consumption, better optimize their flight scheduling, so they can better use gate space at airports, which is really costly, reduce flight delays, which is really costly for airlines. If you remember that Southwest debacle a couple of years ago around Christmas, that cost them like $850 million. Being able to optimize their flight scheduling is going to be huge. But you also have FedEx and UPS being able to better track their flights, and then overall aerospace safety, as opposed to radar. Now you can get a lot more precise with where these airplanes are. I think they're tapping into a huge network, and using token incentives, they can get much better quality deployments by tying tokens to the quality of deployment, and then also get coverage in areas that coverage doesn't exist today. Super excited. Again, token not launched yet, but expected to happen on January. That's also when that dual miner is expected to start shipping. So that's super exciting.
By the way, one of the things that was so interesting to me about Wingbits when we had them on the podcast, gosh, this was probably a year ago at this point, but so flight tracking is a very regulated space, but the initial company behind unlocking a lot of the flight tracking, it was a project that was it was led by aviation enthusiasts who just wanted to have access to the data. And the company that was aggregating it into a flight tracking dashboard got acquired, and they took that away. And so all of those flight enthusiasts who were contributing because they were pilots and they wanted to have access to the data essentially got rug pulled by the company. And so Wingbits was able to step in and bring back that value exchange so they could contribute again, because they wanted to, if you're an aviation enthusiast, you want to be able to participate, see that data. So I loved that story because it's so telling that DePIN can align these incentives, and it's solving a problem that's done by a collective effort, not just by a couple companies that set up these sensors all over the world. So I'm in 100% alignment with you on the Wingbits play.
Yeah. And it's interesting because, to your point, the networks that exist today for this flight tracking, it's flight enthusiasts, right? They're doing it for free. They're getting no tokens, but so they get access to some of the flight tracking tools. But that also has some shortcomings, because if you're not incentivized with a token, like you're not incentivized then to optimize your setup to get a higher antenna, to get better or clearer path. You also have latency issues. Or if they go on vacation, maybe they shut off their device. They don't care about uptime. Having a token incentive model now gives all these deployers a reason monetarily to optimize their setup and have better uptime and have less latency. And when you're talking about using AI with this data to run models, and real-time data is going to be really critical, latency is a big concern, right? Yeah, man, they're going to get much better data sets by incentivizing through tokens. So very exciting. Okay, this is my storage play, Arweave. So I've looked at a lot of them, a lot of the other storage plays. Most of the other storage options are going after temporary storage, where you're paying monthly. They're trying to go head to head with AWS, Google Cloud. It's really hard because the cost of storage has come down drastically. It's hard to really compete in that area, but Arweave is doing something totally different. It's permanent storage. So you pay one time up front and your file is stored on the blockchain for a couple hundred years. And they have it set up, a model in place that the cost of storage is expected to go down over time. Their cost model does have that figured in to an extent, but they have it set up in a way that they can fund their network well into the future, hundreds of years into the future. Now, it's been around for 6 years. And for the first 5 years, I think they had a total of 1 billion transactions. They're having 1 billion transactions a month now on the network. It's estimated that 85% of Solana's NFT collections are stored on Arweave. And there's 20 layer ones storing their blockchain data on Arweave. So it's getting massive usage. And in the 6 years that it's been around, I think they had 10 minutes of downtime. It was like 10 days after their launch, 100% uptime since then. But this is huge, AO. So this is a project being built on top of Arweave. And you're now able to run smart contracts on top of Arweave's infrastructure. They're expecting that it's going to be responsible for about 90% of the usage on the network. And frankly, looking at where it's at right now, $27. I originally covered this on my channel at like $4, but $1.8 billion market cap. I've been adding a lot to this position over the last couple months. I am very, very bullish on where this can go. It's available on crypto.com. It looks like Binance and KuCoin as well.
Yeah, they got a lot of big exchanges.
It's not on Coinbase. It is its own layer one. So there is a specific wallet to download it. I think it's Arweave Connect. If you're going to invest in this, not financial advice, but I would recommend moving it into the wallet because you get airdropped AO tokens for being an Arweave holder. If you leave it on the exchange, though, you won't get those AO tokens. So
that's good alpha.
Yeah, so I'd recommend moving it into your own wallet. Okay, Render. Man, okay, this is going to be one of the leading DePIN projects. This team is like cracked, man. It's like ridiculous. So Render, they are aggregating GPUs, and it's like the Upwork or Fiverr for cloud compute, right? And Jules Urbach is the founder. This guy is freaking genius. You look at his work history, it's remarkable. But look at their team. You have Arya Emanuel. He's the CEO of Endeavor. They owned the UFC, the WWE. J.J. Abrams, he was like the producer for some of the Star Wars movies. Yep. Brendan Eich, founder, CEO of Brave, which is the Brave browser. Mike Winkelmann, or Beeple, probably the most well-known NFT artist. I think he sold that one piece for $69 million.
Yeah.
Dude, and they've already have a partnership with Apple, and they just announced that they have a huge project coming up with Paramount Pictures. So rendering is huge for developing movies. Now it is a little, higher market cap, 4.44 billion, $8.58. I started covering this one at like $1.50 as well. But look, it's I want to say 38 project. Where is that at? It's number 34 project. Now, I think this thing's going to break into the top 20 projects moving forward. Yeah, this really like Render and what they're doing. It's huge. They could attract a lot of institutional investment.
Do you have any data for Render around like the growth rate with their GPU consumption at all?
I would have to pull up their dashboard.
That's okay. I was just curious if you had any information offhand to see how that growth is projecting.
I didn't pull that up, but yeah, I know they're getting a tremendous amount of usage. I know they have some massive partnerships they've had, like for Apple, for example, with their VR headset, which hasn't done extremely well, but it requires a lot of rendering. I think they'll be able to tap into Render for that. But the fact that they're working with Paramount Pictures for rendering movies is massive. But no, that's something I'll have to pull that data. I do updates on these pretty regularly. My next update, I'll have to touch on the usage metrics there.
Yeah, I was gonna say, how cool would it be if the next Star Wars movie was produced partially with this crypto network? That would be freaking awesome.
That would be freaking cool. I think we're gonna see that stuff, man. They've done some commercials and stuff. And people don't even know. There's been a couple Apple commercials where they have like the render symbol in there on like the new, people have no idea it's a crypto project. It's pretty
That went
freaking
over
cool.
my head. I haven't seen that.
It's freaking awesome. So great project, great team. And they're a behemoth. Like when it comes to the AI GPU networks, I think they're going to be the leader of the pack for sure. Streamer, this one, another lower cap option. They've been around for 7 years. It's a peer-to-peer data streaming network. They're going to be like a major backbone to the infrastructure of all these DePIN projects. One of the kind of the dirty little secret about some of these DePIN projects, they're still using AWS or Google Cloud, like centralized entities for storage and for cloud compute. But you look at something like Streamer, and I'll give you an example. Demo is built on top of Streamer. So as opposed to all the vehicles sending their data to a centralized server with Amazon, where it's then sent out to the end user, you would have one vehicle would send their data to 4 more vehicles. They would send it to 4 more vehicles. So it has this ripple effect that's peer-to-peer where you don't have to ever rely on a centralized entity to hold the data. And this is huge for a number of reasons, but especially for data security. So it's all encrypted. The original sender encrypts the data. The intended recipient then has the ability to unlock that data as it's transferred through the network, though it's fully encrypted, but it's never on a centralized server. So you don't have to worry about some of these hacks that we've been seeing. It's also going to be a lot more cost effective. And I do believe it's going to allow a lot of these DePIN networks to get fully decentralized, because they're still in their stack. There's still centralized features in many cases. And they were around for 6 years before they had their mainnet launch. That was just earlier this year. So they wanted to get things right. You don't see that a lot in the crypto space. A lot of them want to have their mainnet launch and kind of figure things out as they go. So they basically have an enterprise grade solution available already. So they'll not only be able to work with crypto projects, but they're going to be able to work with Web2 companies that want to decentralize their data streaming stack. And I think there's massive potential here. Sitting at like 5.5 cents, $59 million market cap. That's another one that I am invested in. And then the last one I want to talk about is WeatherXM. You look at the network, they are deploying weather stations all over the world. Currently, there's about 17,500 stations that are built and claimed. 6,500 of those are installed at this point. I started doing a lot of research on hyper-local weather data. So things are about to change very drastically when it comes to how weather is used in our lives. In many cases in the past, they'd pull weather data from like your nearest airport and then extrapolate that, make a bunch of assumptions about the surrounding areas. With hyperlocal weather data, you're going to be able to get very granular data collection. And over time now, you'll be able to have a historical data set and in a very granular way. So that's going to allow forecasting to get far more accurate. And this is really big for example, farmers and agriculture. And they're going to be able to better optimize water usage. And that's really important, not just from a cost standpoint, but if you overwater your crops, you can actually damage your crops, or underwater, obviously. But it's also going to help them with timing on when to spray their crops to make sure that there's not going to be any rainfall. But in a number of ways, it's really critical for agriculture, for construction as well. So you'll be able to time, okay, on this job site, between these hours, the wind loads are going to be too high to operate the cranes. So we need to send our employee to this job site first, and then we can send him between these hours when the crane can be operated. Or we need to lay down concrete, but we need to make sure that there's not going to be any precipitation. So timing the laying of that concrete. And other areas are retail. So this is super interesting. Let's say that you're a Home Depot and you can look out a week in advance and say, okay, this specific area is going to have temperatures over 100 degrees, humidity over this level. Looking back historically, when this happened 3 years ago, our air conditioning sales were 3 times as much. So we need to stock our shelves with more air conditioning units. And then eventually you'll get to the point where like you wake up in the morning and your schedule is synced up with your Alexa device and you ask about the weather and it's going to tell you, you need to bring an extra layer to your 8 a.m. meeting. Make sure you have your umbrella when you go get your hair done at noon, and based on what location you're going to be in. So this data, this hyperlocal weather data is really valuable. energy as well. ComEd's running a study in New York right now where there's hot pockets in parts of the city, and they need to invest in more infrastructure for steam and for cables for power, and looking out into the future, making sure your infrastructure is built out for different changes in climate. So there's a huge market here. And right now they're focused on getting coverage in areas where there isn't coverage today, and then eventually becoming the largest decentralized weather network in the world. That's going to take some time, but certainly a big market to move into there. And looking at their token, oh, it's up. So 73 cents, still $43 million market cap. So you notice a lot of these we've covered are 50 million or less market cap. So it'd be fun to keep an eye on these in the next 6 months or so.
Oh yeah, I think WeatherXM possibly has the chance of being the most valuable data set in the sense that it affects commerce globally in so many different facets, whether it's all the examples you gave, logistics, shipping. I'm here in Austin. I moved down the year after that crazy freeze where people didn't have energy people died because they didn't have access to heat for a couple of weeks. But all the examples that you talked about where you need to either ship more heaters or air conditioning units, or Amazon's going to be able to optimize how they can do deliveries. And you think about airports and all of these different intersections of that data it's so important and so valuable. The fact that they have, not financial advice, but they're only at a $50 million market cap or so is crazy, because everybody needs that for their projections and their modeling. And it has a huge impact on just global commerce in general.
Yeah, they can hit the total addressable market for weather data. It affects everything.
Yeah.
It's
not just, am I going to get rained on at my soccer game? Is my $1 billion a day shipping business going to be affected by adverse weather that we're not aware of because we just don't have the right data?
Absolutely. Yeah, I had no idea. I had some weather stations deployed, and I'm like, I don't really get the business sense for this. And then my buddy Suburban Crypto, he's like, man, you should take another look at hyperlocal weather data. I think there's some potential here. And he was saying he knows a guy that owns a golf course in the middle of nowhere that they don't have weather data. They pay $200 a month for a subscription to this weather data, and it's literally a report that's emailed to them. It's not even it's archaic, and they're spending all this money, and man, there's a huge market there to tap into. So it just comes down to the execution of the team, but they're doing a good job so far in growing the network, and they're not just creating tools for the end user. They're going to be able to be a feeder of data into other models that already exist. They'll be able to get them data that they couldn't get elsewhere. So I think there's just so many ways they can go with that project.
Oh yeah, well, it's amazing. So many of the projects that I talk to, everybody snubs their nose at hedge funds and all these different trading firms, but they leverage these kinds of insights for so many of their different investment theses because it's their edge in a lot of respects. I don't remember where I heard this initially, but I remember there was a trader at some hedge fund that was looking at satellite data for oil wells or where the level was with respect to height. Anyway, long story short, they were leveraging these just random data sets to be able to predict what was going to happen with oil futures and other commodities. That is so tied to weather and just a wide, vast array of data sets or use cases. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, it's why I had no idea until I started going down that rabbit hole. The last 2 weeks, I've been doing a lot of research on that. But I'm going to put out a video on WeatherXM, and we talked about this before. I'm also working on a video about the historical dominance of the U.S. dollar and why the events that led up to where we are now, why I think Bitcoin is going to surge, why I do believe a strategic reserve is coming for Bitcoin. So I'm working on those 2 videos now, which a little plug, you should definitely subscribe to my channel, DePIN Connection. Looking to grow my subscriber count and cover a lot of the stuff that we talked about in this interview.
We'll definitely be sure to link all that down below. I'm personally very excited for your Bitcoin strategic reserve video because it's something that it's important for people to understand the historical dominance of the way that the U.S. came to become the global reserve currency and the current threat that we're under, and why Bitcoin has a real opportunity to either continue strengthening the position of the U.S. or just opt out of all of the global conflicts with BRICS and everything else. So I'm very excited about that. I did have one other question that we talked about projects that have live tokens now. For your deployment strategy, if you're analyzing a project or looking at potentially buying hardware for a fleet, if you will, is a requirement for you personally that they have a liquid token that you're able to do splits with deployers, or are you buying hardware for a project that hasn't had their TGE yet? Is that in your analysis or sort of investment thesis at all?
I started deploying Weather XM stations before the token was launched. And like Hivemapper, I put my pre-orders in the very first day. So well before they started, 8 months before they started shipping devices. So for me, it's more so, okay, is the project viable? And in most of those cases, though, while you're not earning the token, you're at least pre-mining, if you will. So when there's a launch, you will get compensated for that work you've done. And actually, I'd say the earlier you can get in, normally the better, right?
Yeah.
And that's really, it's true of any investment. If you're working for a startup and you're an early employee, like if they go public, you're going to be compensated as such because you're taking on more risk than once it's more established. So for me, I'm like, the earlier I can get in, the better, because generally you do get paid out if the project does well. So obviously it's really important to do your due diligence and your risk assessment. There's always risk in everything. There's no such thing as a risk-free investment, let's say, but doing your assessment properly, being really diligent there. But yeah, if you can get involved on the front end, like you're normally going to do pretty well. The earlier, the better.
Yeah, makes total sense. I was just curious, as you're setting these up with other partners effectively that you have to do splits for, how that is part of your deployment process. But I agree, if you can get in early, that's always going to be the best place to get the most upside. I want to be sure people go check out your YouTube channel. You talked a little bit about the types of content you make, going and having founders on, talking about the projects, doing deep dives. What other types of content do you create for people who are going to go subscribe to your channel?
Yeah, let's see here. I'll pull it up here. On Wingbits, I do like a broader market update. I do a lot of those. I do one that's like more specific to DePIN. So I do, quick updates on all the projects that I cover, what's happening in the space, and then a broader market update that is kind of higher level. There's another market update there. I do a lot of tutorials. So you'll see, I did one. This is my story on how I got into DePIN and the different ways you can participate, whether it's as an investor, a small scale deployer, large scale deployer. I have a tutorial on how to swap tokens and the interviews, like you said. And then I even have like tutorials, like here's some map improvement updates. And then I even have tutorials. I have one on how I've, set up my LLC, the things that I came up on that were unexpected and setting up a DePIN business. And then how to manage your fleet, how to recruit Uber and Lyft drivers. So like everything from tutorials to interviews to overviews to market updates, pretty wide range of topics that I cover. But 5 key tips for the bull run based on mistakes that I made in the last market cycle. So I try to cover as much as I can to just kind of help shorten people's learning curve, man. That's really the goal. Because this space, I think there's so much potential, but I also realize that there's a lot of people that, they have families at home, they have full-time jobs, people working multiple jobs. They don't have time to freaking do 8 hours of research a day. You know what I mean? Yeah. So if I can take all the time that I'm taking to research the space and kind of put it into a digestible format to make it easier for people to enter, that's ultimately my goal, because this is, something that I think people are going to look back and be like, man, I wish I had missed out on that opportunity. I've been there. There's plenty of times that I missed out on opportunities. So I'm like, okay, looking forward, what can I do to position myself in this space, but also help others?
Yeah. You are a gold mine for anybody that's looking to either get in from the deployment side to buy these tokens. I definitely want everybody to go check that out, because it's been helpful for me. And as you said, people don't have 8 hours a day to look into these projects to really understand. It's convoluted enough once you start introducing crypto things if you're a non-crypto user, let alone understanding the business case, the point of having a decentralized network. So I think your resources are just invaluable from that standpoint. And we're very grateful for all the work you do on that front. I know we've chatted about so many things. I actually had one other question I wanted to ask you, which was, you spent a lot of time in the solar space. Are you looking at any decentralized energy projects that are DePIN related that either excite you or that are interesting to you because you've got some personal history there?
So I'm starting to dig in. One in particular, I want to say it's Glow. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
So I do look at like the amount of revenue that these projects are bringing in, and specifically revenue to market cap ratio. And Glow is like the top of that list. They are generating a ton of revenue. So I've got the 2 videos I'm working on now, but I'm already starting to do research on that one just to see what's going on there. And it does align with my background. So I think there's a lot of potential there. But yeah, it's anytime you see an outlier like that, where you see the amount of revenue coming in compared to the market cap, like that's something worth noting, I would say. Yeah. So certainly I am starting to look into those projects as well, and that one in particular, especially.
Yeah. Glow also is a crack team. I was really fortunate looking back now. We had David, the founder, on really before I would say they blew up with either just they had a big investment round that happened recently, or any of these solar farms that got set up and all the revenue. And he was the founder of SIA, which is like one of the like an OG crypto project that is huge. And so the guy's been in the space for a very long time. He knows how to do it the right way, and it's very evident by the results that they're generating that they're executing on that past experience. So they're a phenomenal project to look at. The only thing I am frustrated by is that I can't buy the token right now, because it's hard. Like with Glow, you have to set up a new solar farm and you earn tokens that way. And it like going and just buying them on a exchange isn't currently available from my understanding. So hopefully that'll change soon, but I got to do a little bit more research there because it is a project that's making big waves.
What's it built on? Which chain? You'd think a token holder would be able to just create a decentralized liquidity farm, right?
Yeah, we'll have to do some research there offline, but they're certainly moving in the right direction with the revenue that they're generating. They are on Ethereum. I knew that actually from the conversation we had, but yeah, I got to go look to see if there's a DEX pool set up, because they are certainly a project that has, I think, huge potential based on the revenue that they're generating and the associated market cap.
I agree, man. I agree completely. That like really drew my attention though, because like I do consistently look at the top revenue producing DePIN projects, and it was by far the highest revenue to market cap ratio. GeoNet's up there too, but it was better than GeoNet. So
I think they just passed Helium in terms of revenue for this past month, if I'm not mistaken, which is pretty shocking.
Yeah, that's
absolutely
crazy.
Huge. Gosh, Brad, this has been a masterclass deep in analyzing projects, building deployment businesses. You are a wealth of information, and it's coming from someone who's actually done it. You've got the history to back up everything that you're sharing with people. I so appreciate you coming on to share, because like I said, I've learned an incredible amount just following you, watching your videos, reading what you post on X, and I'm excited that our listeners can get some of that insight and information, because you're doing the good work.
I appreciate that, man. I appreciate what you guys are doing, because you've helped me find some of these projects. I appreciate all the work you're doing, man. I'm excited to see where this space goes. I really do believe that we are at this inflection point where we're going to see a rotation finally from some of the memes coin stuff that's going on into like true utility. I think it's coming, and we're still so early, man. You know, I think the combined market cap for all the DePIN projects is probably up now since I last looked, probably in the 20 billion something range. The total addressable market for DePIN is expected to grow to $3.5 trillion. We're incredibly early here, and I think a lot of the projects we covered today are going to be ones that are around into the future. And obviously, you know how I feel about the upside potential. I have a pretty substantial investment in all of them, so we'll see where things go. Yep.
It's going to be great. We're here for the long term. We're all here to get to that 3.5 trillion. It's probably going to be several years, decades in time before that materializes. But I think for people that are here now, this is going to be the sector that dominates crypto in terms of adoption, moving the needle forward, just changing the way the world works for better and making everything more efficient, more equitable. You actually get a chance to own part of it, which is not something that you can say with a lot of other industries or sort of the Web 2 space. You can buy a stock, but that doesn't really net you the same access or benefits that you do with DePIN networks. So we're here for all of it.
Agreed. And you can get it on the ground floor. Like with these token launches, that's one of the beautiful things about crypto, is that you can get in very early, as opposed to like the stock market. In many cases, we can't get in on IPOs. You have to work with a specific broker that has the ability to buy into IPOs. We can get in on the ground floor here, and like you said, take ownership by participating. I mean, it's freaking awesome, man. I love this space. It's so fun. It's like I'm learning new stuff every single day. So it's super exciting.
It's super exciting. We're going to have to do an update in 6 months or so to look at all these projects that you're excited about, see where they're going, see how they're growing. I'm sure there's going to be new projects that are on your radar.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, it's just going to be an amazing time, and we'll make sure to continue updating folks along the way. Where can people go stay up to date with you? You've got your YouTube channel. We're going to link that below. You're also fairly active on X and Twitter. Where's the best place for people to just stay up to date with everything you're doing?
Yeah, DePIN Connection, my YouTube channel, same thing for Twitter or X. I am working on a website right now. That's being built out. I'm going to have different subsections for every project that I cover, as well as like a bio of myself and a section for consultations. So I'm going to start offering some consultations for people wanting to get in and build out their own business, help them get their feet on the ground. And then I do a little bit on TikTok. I have a TikTok. I cover a wider range of topics, a lot more basic financial trends and macroeconomic trends, as well as DePINs. Feel free to find me on there as well. A little bit more short form videos. Try to stay active on there as much as possible. But yeah, those are really the main avenues.
Amazing. We'll definitely link that below for folks to go find you on all those different platforms. But Brad, I want to thank you again. This has been a masterclass in DePIN. You are a super important person in the space. We appreciate all the work that you're doing. It's going to move the needle quite a bit. Everybody, thank you for tuning in. This was a fun episode. We got to cover a lot of different topics. We're excited to do that update in a few months to see where things are at. I want to say thank you again to Brad for coming on, and we will see everyone on the next one. Take care.